Have you ever experienced a moment where everything changed in an instant? Where one decision, one encounter, reshaped your entire journey? Today I'm sharing a story that might just leave you thinking long after the video ends. It's a tale of unexpected strength, of finding courage in the most surprising places. Stay with me, and let's explore this life-changing journey together. If this resonates with you, feel free to like and share. Your support means the world. Nanny Stories. Black Maid sleeps on the floor with baby. What Billionaire did next will shock you. The unseen caregiver. Maya Williams wasn't the kind of woman who ever expected to find herself working in a mansion. The city was too vast, its rich and poor, divided by walls both visible and invisible. Born and raised in a cramped, worn-down apartment on the outskirts of New York, Maya had always known the realities of being on the margins. But in the world of the Blakes, the wealthy family she worked for, everything was a performance, a polished facade that never let you see the cracks underneath. Maya's job was simple, on the surface. She was hired as a maid, tasked with looking after the house and the child. But Lily Blake was not just any child, and Maya was not just any maid. From the very first day, Maya had felt something stir in her when she looked at the tiny infant. She was only a few months old when Maya started, but there was a noticeable emptiness in her big blue eyes. Lily cried often, clinging to anyone who would hold her, even for just a moment of comfort. But in the grand mansion, no one had the time to comfort her. Nathaniel Blake, Lily's father, was a powerful man, a billionaire with an empire of his own. To him, life was structured, organized, and controlled. Emotions were weaknesses. And in his eyes, Maya was nothing more than a maid, a woman whose role was to serve and then disappear. She wasn't meant to be seen, not truly, and certainly not meant to offer any sort of emotional connection to his daughter. Lily was just another possession, another thing to be cared for but not loved in the way a mother would love her child. Yet when Lily's cries became unbearable, it was always Maya who had the courage to step in. Even though she was told to stay in the background, Maya would find herself slipping into the nursery late at night when the sounds of a distressed child echoed through the halls. It was in those quiet moments, standing by the crib with the baby in her arms, that Maya felt a connection, a pull, something that went beyond duty. Lily calmed only when Maya held her. No one else, neither Mrs. Delaney, the housekeeper, nor Nathaniel himself, could offer her the same solace. Maya whispered soft words into her tiny ear, swaying back and forth, her hand gently rubbing the baby's back. The girl would quiet instantly, her small body finally relaxing in Maya's arms. And for a moment the house felt more like a home, even if just for the two of them. Nathaniel noticed the difference, but he never mentioned it directly. Maya didn't expect him to, she was just doing her job after all. But in the quiet, his eyes watched her, studying the way she held the baby, the way Lily seemed to trust Maya completely. And while he said nothing, something in him shifted. It had been a long day for Nathaniel. Business calls, meetings, the constant pressure of managing his vast empire had worn him thin. When he finally returned to the mansion late in the evening, he found his daughter's cries reverberating throughout the house. He had spent years perfecting his empire, but this was the one thing he hadn't figured out, the thing he had ignored for so long. The baby needed more than money. She needed more than the best clothes, the best food, the finest education. She needed the one thing that no wealth could buy: emotional connection, stability, and love. And, in that moment, Nathaniel was forced to admit something he hadn't fully acknowledged before. He wasn't sure how to give her that. Maya was sitting on the floor with Lily when he entered the nursery. The child was nestled in her arms, fast asleep. Her small body was resting against Maya's chest, her face relaxed, free of the worry that had filled it earlier in the evening. Nathaniel stood at the door, watching the scene unfold. The contrast between the wealth surrounding him and the simple comfort that Maya was offering Lily made something inside him stir. He cleared his throat. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice cutting through the silence of the room. Maya looked up, startled by his presence. She was used to keeping a low profile, slipping in and out of rooms without anyone noticing. But this time, Nathaniel had seen her, and for some reason, that made her uncomfortable. "I'm just holding her," Maya said softly. She needed to be held. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He didn't say anything at first, but his eyes lingered on Maya, on the way she cradled his daughter with such ease, such comfort. It was something he hadn't expected, a tender act from someone who, to him, had always been just an employee, someone who did her job and nothing more. Yet here she was, offering Lily something he hadn't been able to give her. "I don't need you to be her mother," Nathaniel said, his tone sharp. "You're here to work, not to replace Claire." Maya stiffened at his words. Claire. The name hit her like a cold wave. She had heard about Claire, Nathaniel's ex-wife, but that didn't matter now. Maya wasn't trying to replace anyone, she just wanted to help Lily. And yet Nathaniel's words stung. She had known from the beginning that she was never meant to stay, but in that moment, it didn't matter. "I'm not trying to be anyone else," Maya replied. Her voice was steady, despite the emotion swirling inside her. "I'm just trying to help." Nathaniel stared at her for a long moment, then looked down at Lily. There was something about the way Maya held her that made him feel both frustrated and something else, something he couldn't quite identify. "Just don't forget your place," he said coldly. Then he turned and left the room, leaving Maya alone with the baby. Maya watched as Nathaniel's shadow disappeared into the hallway. She wasn't sure what to feel, anger, hurt. But one thing was clear, she would not be treated like this anymore. She wouldn't let his harsh words affect her. She had a job to do, and she would do it well. For Lily's sake. She glanced down at the baby in her arms. Lily stirred slightly, her tiny hands reaching up to Maya's face, as if to reassure herself that Maya was still there. Maya held her close, whispering a quiet promise. "I'll never leave you, little one." And for the first time since entering the Blake estate, Maya knew that she was not just a maid. She was a protector. She was a safe place in a world that had shown her nothing but coldness. A heart of stone. The days following Maya's confrontation with Nathaniel were filled with an odd stillness. The mansion, with its marble floors, gilded accents, and endless halls, had become an even colder place. Maya moved through it like a shadow, unseen, unnoticed, but always present. The house, which once felt like a vast labyrinth of emptiness, now seemed full of life, albeit a life she was only allowed to observe, never truly partake in. Nathaniel had retreated into his work, avoiding any further interactions with her. His coldness had returned, sharp and unyielding, like the very walls of the house that encased them. He had no use for empathy, no space for tenderness, and certainly no desire for vulnerability. Maya was nothing more than the help to him, just another cog in the machine that was his world. He had made that clear in his words, in the harsh tone he used when speaking to her. In his eyes, she was a temporary fixture, someone who would come and go, just like the others who had filled the roles of caretakers before her. She wasn't special. She wasn't someone he needed to understand or connect with. And as the days passed, Maya began to accept that. She had no illusions about her place in his world. She had grown up in a place where survival was more important than belonging, where nothing came easily, and where the idea of ever being seen as anything other than what she was laughable. But something in her, something deep and stubborn, refused to accept Nathaniel's version of their relationship. She wasn't just going to disappear into the background like the others had. She wasn't just here to serve and leave. Maya had learned long ago that if you were ever going to make it in a world that didn't want to see you, you had to make yourself seen. And she wasn't going to let Nathaniel's coldness stop her from doing that. The first night Nathaniel returned to the mansion after his harsh words was marked by an eerie silence. Maya had tucked Lily into her crib, rocking the baby to sleep with the lullaby that had become their secret bond. The child's tiny fingers curled around Maya's hand, as if holding on to something she could trust. Lily had been through so much already, losing her mother, being thrust into a life of wealth that was foreign and unsettling to her. And Maya couldn't help but feel that she too was part of Lily's salvation. But it wasn't just about Lily. It was about Maya too. Her own heart had been a battlefield for years, torn between survival and longing. Maya had learned to keep her emotions in check, to bury her own desires beneath the weight of her responsibilities. But Lily's presence had brought something else to the surface, a raw, unspoken need to be seen, to be understood. And in those rare moments when the house was quiet, Maya allowed herself to feel that need, even if only for a fleeting second. When Nathaniel finally returned to the mansion, his mood had shifted. He was quieter than usual, retreating into the study, where he buried himself in the demands of his empire. Maya noticed the change in him, the way he would sometimes glance at her out of the corner of his eye, as if trying to gauge her reaction to his presence. But he said nothing. His silence was as heavy as his words had been before. The following days were filled with more of the same: distance, avoidance, and a cold formality that seemed to define every interaction. Maya did her work, caring for Lily, managing the household, and keeping her thoughts to herself. But every time Nathaniel passed by, she felt his eyes on her. It was as if he was measuring her, trying to figure out how to reconcile the image of her he had created in his mind with the reality of who she truly was. One evening, as Maya was finishing her shift in the kitchen, she found herself face to face with Nathaniel in the hallway. It wasn't unusual for their paths to cross, but there was something different about the way he looked at her this time. His expression was unreadable, but the tension between them was palpable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there, the weight of their unspoken words hanging in the air. Finally, Nathaniel broke the silence, his voice low but steady. "You're good with her," he said, his words more of an acknowledgement than a compliment. "Lily." Maya didn't answer immediately. She had never been one to seek validation, but this felt different. It wasn't just a remark about her job. It was something more. She took a breath before speaking, her voice calm, steady. "I'm just trying to do what's right by her," Maya replied, her gaze meeting his for the first time in days. "She deserves someone who'll care for her, not just keep her safe. She needs more than that." Nathaniel's jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, Maya saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Something vulnerable, something real. It was gone almost as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the familiar mask of control he wore so effortlessly. He nodded, but there was no warmth in his gesture, no indication that he understood the weight of her words. "I don't need you to care for her like that," Nathaniel said, his tone cool. "I just need you to do your job." Maya felt a pang in her chest, but she swallowed it down. She had to keep her composure. She had to focus on the task at hand. She had to keep herself from being drawn into a world of emotions that could only hurt her. "I know," she replied, her voice quiet but firm. "But sometimes doing the job means more than just following orders." There was a long pause. Nathaniel opened his mouth to speak but stopped himself, as if weighing his words. In the end, he simply turned away, his footsteps echoing down the hall as he disappeared into his study. Maya stood there for a moment, her heart racing. She wasn't sure what she had expected from him. She wasn't sure if he would ever change, if he would ever allow himself to be vulnerable enough to see her as something other than the maid. But one thing was clear: she wasn't going to let him define her, not anymore. She would be seen, one way or another. And if Nathaniel Blake couldn't see her for who she truly was, then it was time to stop waiting for him to do so. It was time to stop waiting for anyone to see her. Because Maya Williams had already decided that she was worth more than the life she had been given. And nothing, not even Nathaniel's heart of stone, could stop her from finding the life she deserved. The breaking point. Maya hadn't expected it to be easy. No one in her life had ever handed her anything without a fight. She knew the value of hard work, of pushing through pain and exhaustion, and of never asking for permission to exist in a space that was never meant for her. But still, something about the dynamic between her and Nathaniel Blake felt like it was slowly unraveling. Every encounter, every moment they shared, seemed to build toward something she couldn't quite grasp yet. A confrontation she wasn't prepared for, but also couldn't avoid. The days passed in a strange limbo. Maya focused on her responsibilities, keeping the mansion spotless, ensuring Lily was cared for, and staying out of Nathaniel's way as he buried himself in the work that demanded his attention. The billionaire's sharp temper and harsh words seemed to bounce off her, leaving no lasting mark. But there was something in the way he watched her now, something in the way he observed her interactions with Lily. Nathaniel's presence had grown more pronounced, his cold distance turning into something sharper. He wasn't just watching her from afar anymore, he was inspecting her. She could feel his eyes on her, could hear the way his voice faltered when he spoke to her, a mix of irritation and something else she couldn't quite place. But Maya had no intention of backing down. She had learned long ago that if you waited for the world to offer you validation, you'd wait forever. One evening, as Maya was sitting on the couch with Lily in her arms trying to get the baby to sleep, she heard footsteps behind her. Nathaniel had entered the room quietly, as if trying not to disturb the peace. She felt him before she saw him, the weight of his presence in the room making her tense, but she didn't look up. Her focus was on the tiny child nestled in her arms, breathing softly as she finally drifted off to sleep. Maya's body relaxed as she watched Lily sleep, her tiny hands curled into soft fists, her face peaceful for once. But then Nathaniel spoke, his voice low and rough, cutting through the silence. "You've been spending a lot of time with her," he said, his tone lacking the sharpness it had carried before. There was a strange undercurrent to his words, one that made Maya's pulse quicken. "I'm her caretaker," Maya replied, her voice steady but guarded. She didn't look up at him. She didn't need to. She knew what his unspoken question was. His words had been indirect, but she could hear the implications clearly. He was asking if she had grown too attached, if she was crossing a line she shouldn't be crossing. But Maya refused to let his doubts control her. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed as he took a step closer. "You're not her mother," he said flatly, almost as if trying to convince himself more than her. "You're just here to look after her. That's your role." Maya felt her chest tighten. She had heard those words before, in countless forms from countless people. She had spent her life being told that she was nothing more than what others allowed her to be. But Lily had changed something in her. This wasn't just a job anymore. She wasn't just here to look after the baby. She was here because she wanted to be, because she chose to be. "I know my place," Maya said quietly, still refusing to look at him. "But that doesn't mean I can't offer something more. She needs someone who will be there for her, Nathaniel, someone who can offer more than just the basics." For a moment, Nathaniel was silent, and Maya could feel his gaze burning into her, as if he were trying to read her, to decipher the meaning behind her words. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer, but still laced with that undercurrent of uncertainty. "You really think you can be that person for her?" His words were laced with doubt, but also with something else, something Maya couldn't place. "You think you can fill that gap?" Maya looked up at him then, her gaze unwavering. "I don't know if I can fill it," she said honestly, "but I can try, and I'm not going to walk away because you don't think I should." There was a long pause. The air between them was thick with tension. Maya felt it. A magnetic pull, something that had been building for weeks now. The way Nathaniel looked at her, the way his presence seemed to loom over her even when he wasn't near. It was as if he was beginning to see her, not just as the help, but as something more. She had been prepared for this confrontation, but now that it was here, she didn't know what to expect. Nathaniel's expression hardened again, his walls going up once more. He ran a hand through his hair, an almost nervous gesture. "This isn't about what you think it is," he said, his voice strained. "This is about doing what's right. And right now, the right thing is keeping your distance." Maya shook her head, refusing to back down. "The right thing? The right thing is for Lily to feel safe. And if that means holding her, comforting her when she needs it, then I will do that. I don't care if you think I'm crossing a line. She's a child, Nathaniel, and she needs more than just a roof over her head." For a moment, Nathaniel didn't respond. His eyes flickered with something. A flash of frustration, maybe, or a deep-seated regret. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual cool detachment. "I don't need your charity, Maya," he said sharply, his voice like ice. "I don't need you to play the martyr." "I'm not trying to be a martyr," Maya said, her voice low but firm. "I'm trying to be what she needs, and if that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe it's time to face the fact that you can't do everything on your own." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Nathaniel looked at her, his eyes narrowing as he processed what she had said. For a moment, he didn't speak. He just stood there looking at her, as if trying to understand this new version of Maya that was standing before him. The woman who wasn't afraid to challenge him, who wasn't afraid to stand up for herself or the child she cared for. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter, more resigned. "You're right," he muttered, almost under his breath. "I can't do everything." Maya didn't say anything in response. She simply stood there looking at him. The silence between them was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was something else, something that felt like the first crack in the wall he had built around himself. After a long pause, Nathaniel turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps heavy but slow. Maya watched him go, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what had just happened, but she knew one thing. Things were changing. For better or for worse, something had shifted between them. And for the first time, Maya felt like she was no longer invisible. The confrontation had broken something that had been holding them both in place. But it was only the beginning. Maya knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to stand her ground, ready to fight for Lily, and ready to fight for herself. Bridging the gap. The days that followed were an uneasy truce, a period of awkward but necessary adjustments. The tension in the house was palpable, but so was the shift in Maya and Nathaniel's dynamic. They hadn't spoken much beyond what was necessary, about Lily, about the app, about the day-to-day operations, but there was an underlying understanding that something had changed. Maya wasn't just the hired help anymore, and Nathaniel, for all his coldness, wasn't just the demanding billionaire he had once been. Maya had learned over the years to read people, to observe their actions and gestures, to understand their silences. Nathaniel was no different. His movements were sharper now, his decisions more deliberate. There was a new softness in his gaze when he looked at Lily, a tenderness that hadn't been there before. It was like he was waking up to a world he had long ignored, one where his daughter and the people who cared for her mattered more than his business empire. But there was still so much unspoken between them. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel's apology, as genuine as it seemed, was just the beginning of a much larger conversation. She needed to understand him, not just the man who had treated her like an outsider for so long, but the man who had fathered Lily. And as much as she wanted to keep her distance, as much as she longed to preserve her boundaries, there was a part of her that was beginning to care for him in ways she hadn't expected. One evening, as the house settled into its usual rhythm, Maya found herself in the kitchen, preparing a meal for herself and Lily. It was a quiet moment, just the two of them, the sound of the chopping knife against the cutting board filling the air. She had come to appreciate these moments of solitude, where she could center herself and find a sense of peace amidst the chaos of the mansion. As she stirred the pot on the stove, she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. Nathaniel. He stood in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame. "Smells good," he remarked, his voice low but carrying that same warmth she had noticed in him recently. The cold, detached Nathaniel was gone, replaced by someone more human, someone who, despite his flaws and mistakes, was trying to do better. Maya didn't look up at him, but she felt the weight of his gaze. She wasn't sure if it was the lingering apology from their previous conversation or the way his presence now felt less oppressive. But she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him. The connection between them was undeniable, even if it was still wrapped in layers of uncertainty. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady as she continued her task. She wanted to keep things light, to avoid the heavy discussions that had become their new normal. But part of her knew that this, whatever it was, couldn't stay unspoken for long. Nathaniel pushed himself off the doorframe and stepped further into the kitchen, his gaze following her every movement. "I've been thinking," he said, breaking the silence. Maya froze, her hand mid-motion as she looked up at him. The words were coming. She could feel it. "About?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral but curious. "About what you said the other night," he began, his eyes meeting hers. "About us being in this together. I want to understand what that means. For you, for Lily, for us." Maya felt a knot tighten in her chest. She wasn't sure she was ready for this conversation, didn't know if it would lead to answers or more questions, but she couldn't back away from it. Not now. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Nathaniel paused, as if gathering his thoughts. I've been trying to reconcile my past with what's happening now. I've spent so much of my life focusing on building something that matters, something that lasts. But I've neglected the things that matter most, and you, Maya, you've shown me that. Not just with Lily, but with everything. I've been holding on to the wrong things for too long. Maya felt the weight of his words settle over her. She had always known that Nathaniel was more than the hard-edged CEO he presented to the world, but hearing him admit his struggles, his vulnerabilities, was different. It made her see him in a new light, one that was less intimidating and more human. But I don't know what to do with that, he continued, his voice tinged with uncertainty. I don't know how to change everything overnight, and I'm scared of making the same mistakes. I don't want to hurt you or Lily again. Maya turned toward him, her expression softening. Nathaniel, change doesn't happen overnight, it's a process, and we're both figuring it out as we go. But the fact that you're here, that you're even asking, makes all the difference. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward, but rather filled with the weight of unspoken understanding. Maya realized that Nathaniel wasn't asking her to fix him, wasn't expecting her to have all the answers. He was just asking for a chance to do better, and for the first time in a long time, Maya wasn't afraid to give him that chance. I don't know if I can be what you want me to be, Nathaniel said, his voice quieter now. But I can promise you that I'm trying, and I'll keep trying, for Lily, for you. Maya looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know what kind of man Nathaniel would become. But in that moment, she felt a shift, a change in herself, in him, in the house they both occupied. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was real, and sometimes that was enough. We don't have to have all the answers right now, Maya replied softly. But we're here, and that's a good place to start. Nathaniel nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. There was something in his gaze that made Maya's breath catch, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something she couldn't quite name. But for the first time in their complicated relationship, Maya felt like they were on the same page. They were no longer two people occupying the same space. They were beginning to understand each other, to see each other as more than the roles they had been assigned. Later that evening, as she sat with Lily rocking the baby to sleep, Maya felt a new sense of peace. The mansion, once a place of isolation and uncertainty, now felt like a home. Not just because of the walls, the furniture, or the grandeur of the estate, but because, for the first time, she wasn't alone in it. Nathaniel was no longer just the man who owned it. He was part of this too, part of the life they were building together, however imperfectly. Maya knew that there would still be challenges ahead. There would be times when old habits, old fears crept back into their lives. But she also knew that they were no longer the same people they had been when they started. And that made all the difference. The unseen struggles. The weeks that followed Maya's conversation with Nathaniel were filled with a subtle, yet undeniable tension. The house, once a cold and distant place, now hummed with a fragile sense of unity. Maya was still unsure of where she stood in Nathaniel's life, but for the first time, she saw a flicker of something genuine in him, a desire to do better, to be better. And yet, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was still holding him back, something that neither of them had fully addressed. The dynamic between them had shifted, but it wasn't as simple as moving from a place of animosity to one of mutual understanding. It was complicated. Layers of past mistakes, insecurities, and fears wrapped up in both their histories. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel was still trying to protect himself, still reluctant to let go of the walls he had spent years building around his heart. As for Maya, she was caught between the desire to move forward and the fear of being hurt again. She had given so much of herself to others over the years, her time, her energy, her heart, but had always been left with nothing in return. She had learned the hard way that love was not something freely given, especially not to people like her. People who didn't fit the mold of what society deemed worthy of affection. But Lily had changed everything. The little girl with her wide eyes and soft giggles had taught Maya that love wasn't just about grand gestures. It wasn't about titles, money, or status. It was about consistency, about showing up even when it was hard, about being there when someone needed you the most. And Maya had shown up for Lily in a way she never had for herself. One afternoon, as Maya was sitting in the living room playing with Lily, she heard a soft knock on the door. She looked up to see Nathaniel standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Maya had grown used to seeing him in his formal attire, his suit, his tie, the cold professionalism that defined his role as CEO. But today, he was different. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie discarded, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked human. "Maya," he said, his voice low. "Can we talk?" Maya hesitated, her gaze flicking to Lily, who was absorbed in her toys. "About what?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual, though she could feel her pulse quickening. She had grown used to the silence between them, the unspoken words that hung in the air like a cloud. But now it felt like something was about to break. Nathaniel stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. "I know we haven't exactly been open with each other," he began, his voice tinged with something that Maya couldn't quite place. "But I need to tell you something. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about you, about Lily, about us." Maya felt a knot form in her stomach. She had no idea what he was about to say, but she knew it wasn't going to be easy. She braced herself, steeling her emotions for whatever words would come next. "I've been holding on to my past," Nathaniel continued, his eyes meeting hers. "I've spent so much of my life chasing success, chasing things that don't matter in the grand scheme of things. And I've been so focused on keeping up appearances that I've neglected what truly matters. Family, Lily, you." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but it certainly wasn't this. She had spent so much time convincing herself that Nathaniel was beyond redemption, that he was just another rich, self-centered man who couldn't understand the value of what he had. But now, hearing him speak like this, she realized how much she had underestimated him. "I've been a terrible father, Maya," Nathaniel confessed, his voice cracking slightly. "I've been so consumed with work that I missed the moments that truly matter. And I've taken you for granted. I didn't realize how much you were doing for Lily, how much you were sacrificing for her. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to earn it. I want to earn your trust." Maya swallowed hard, her emotions rising to the surface. She had always told herself that she wasn't looking for an apology, that she didn't need Nathaniel to change for her. But in that moment, hearing him admit his faults, hearing him speak so honestly, something inside her softened. It wasn't about forgiveness, it was about understanding, about recognizing that everyone, even Nathaniel, had their struggles, their mistakes, and that maybe, just maybe, they could both find a way to move forward. "I don't know what to say," Maya said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "I never expected you to say that." Nathaniel took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that I see you. I see what you've done for Lily. I see what you've done for me. And I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that." Maya felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. She let it fall because, for the first time in a long time, it felt like she was finally being seen. She had spent so many years hiding, so many years pretending to be strong, pretending to be okay when everything inside her was falling apart. But now, in this moment, she didn't have to pretend anymore. "I've been holding on to things too," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been so afraid of trusting anyone, of letting anyone in. But you're right, it's not just about surviving anymore. It's about living. It's about giving ourselves a chance to be something more than what we were." Nathaniel nodded, his gaze softening. "We don't have to have it all figured out, Maya, but I think we're on the right path." The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with the weight of everything they had said, everything that had been left unsaid for so long. And as Maya looked at Nathaniel, she realized that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to build something real, not just for Lily, but for themselves. "I'm not perfect, Maya," Nathaniel said, his voice steady. "But I'm willing to try. For you. For Lily." Maya smiled faintly, a bittersweet smile. "We'll see," she replied softly. "But for now, that's enough." As she watched him leave the room, Maya felt a sense of quiet resolve settle over her. She had always believed that love was about grand gestures, about sweeping changes. But now, she understood that love was quieter than that. It was about showing up. It was about being there when it mattered, even when it was hard. And in that moment, Maya knew that Nathaniel had shown up for her in a way he never had before. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of the world alone. She had a partner, someone who, despite his flaws, was willing to stand beside her, to help carry the load. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for Maya, that was all she needed. A shift in the storm. The following days unfolded with a quiet rhythm that Maya hadn't expected. Things weren't perfect, far from it, but there was a noticeable difference in the way she moved through the house. Nathaniel had given her the space she needed, and in return, she had allowed herself to open up in ways she never had before. The walls she had built around herself, years of emotional self-preservation, were slowly starting to crumble, piece by piece. It wasn't easy. Old habits die hard, and there were still moments when she caught herself bracing for the disappointment, the rejection she had grown so accustomed to in the past. But then, just as quickly, she'd remember the sincerity in Nathaniel's apology and the small gestures of kindness that had become a part of their new normal. His effort to change, however slow, was visible, and for Maya, that was a start. She spent more time in the nursery, tending to Lily with a quiet dedication that came naturally to her now. The little girl had become the center of her world, and though Maya hadn't fully acknowledged it until recently, she realized that Lily had changed her too. It wasn't just about the responsibility of caring for her anymore. It was about the connection they had, the bond that went beyond the job title. Maya had become something more than the nanny, something more than just the help. She was Lily's protector, her constant, and in return, Lily had become her anchor. As the days passed, Maya also began to notice small changes in Nathaniel. He wasn't just a father who was trying to get it right. He was becoming someone who genuinely understood the importance of the quiet moments. The moments when no one was watching, when it was just him and Lily or him and Maya sharing something real. One evening, as Maya was tucking Lily into bed, she heard the familiar sound of Nathaniel's footsteps in the hallway. He didn't knock this time, didn't wait for permission to enter. Instead, he simply walked into the nursery, his presence a quiet reassurance in the otherwise still room. "You're still here," Maya said, a hint of surprise in her voice as she glanced up from where she was sitting on the edge of the crib. Lily, blissfully unaware of the world beyond her dream-filled slumber, was curled up beneath her blanket, the soft rise and fall of her chest signaling her peaceful sleep. Nathaniel smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth turning upward. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied, his voice steady. "I've been thinking about what you said, Maya, about being here, truly being here." Maya looked at him, her heart catching in her chest. She had said those words to him in passing, never fully expecting them to have an impact. But now, standing in the quiet nursery with him, she realized just how much they had both changed in such a short amount of time. "I meant it," Maya said softly. "Being here isn't just about showing up. It's about showing up for the right reasons. Not because we have to, but because we want to." Nathaniel nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to Lily for a moment before returning to Maya. "I know," he said quietly. "I've spent so much of my life thinking that work was everything, that success meant being in control. But with you, with Lily, I'm starting to see that control isn't what matters. It's the connection, the trust." Maya's breath caught. For the first time, Nathaniel wasn't just speaking in theoretical terms. He wasn't lecturing about his achievements or his ideas of success. He was speaking from a place of understanding, a place of vulnerability. And it was this honesty that Maya hadn't expected, but now desperately needed. "I didn't trust you before," Maya said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. She hadn't meant to say it, but now that it was out in the open, she knew it was the truth. "I didn't trust that you could change, that you could see me for who I am, not just the woman who cares for your daughter, but the woman who has a life, a past, a future of her own. Nathaniel's eyes softened, the hardness that had once defined him now replaced by something deeper. "I get that," he said, his voice low and steady. "And I don't expect you to trust me overnight. I know I've got a lot to prove, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes, for you, for Lily, for us, Lily." Maya didn't know what to say to that. She had always been guarded, always kept a part of herself hidden from everyone, even those closest to her. But Nathaniel's words made her feel something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. "I don't know what happens next," Maya whispered, the vulnerability in her voice startling her. "But I know that I can't go back to the way things were, and I don't want to." Nathaniel stepped closer, his presence a quiet comfort in the dim light of the nursery. "You don't have to," he said gently, his voice a promise. "We're in this together now, and I'll be here, every step of the way." Maya looked up at him, her heart beating faster as she realized the weight of his words. He wasn't just saying them to placate her, to make her feel better. He was saying them because he meant them. He was here, truly here, in a way he hadn't been before. And that meant more than any apology or grand gesture. As they stood there, in the quiet of the nursery, the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future hung in the air. But Maya didn't feel afraid. For the first time, she felt like they were both standing on solid ground, ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, things felt different. There was no grand announcement, no dramatic change. But there was a quiet shift, a subtle yet undeniable change in the atmosphere of the house. Nathaniel wasn't just the father of Lily anymore. He was becoming part of their world in a way that felt natural, like he belonged there. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Maya had always told herself that she didn't need anyone. She had built a life on her own, survived on her own. But as she watched Nathaniel with Lily that morning, something inside her shifted. She didn't have to do this alone anymore. And for the first time, that thought didn't scare her. It felt right. It was a quiet moment, but one that marked the beginning of something new, something real, breaking through the walls. The days continued to blur together, the hum of routine settling in like a familiar song. But beneath the surface of that routine, there were shifts, small, quiet changes that neither Maya nor Nathaniel dared acknowledge fully. And yet, they were there, lingering like the soft glow of dawn before the sun had fully risen. For the first time, Maya didn't feel like a visitor in the grand house. She didn't feel like the hired help or the outsider. She was part of something now, something she hadn't even realized she longed for. The feeling was both comforting and terrifying, but in the end, it was real. Real in a way that made her chest tighten with something she hadn't been able to name until recently. Hope. There were moments when she caught herself staring at Nathaniel, wondering how he had managed to slip past the walls she had spent years building. She hadn't expected him to be so present. He had always been there physically, of course. But now, in these quiet, everyday moments, he was showing up in ways that made Maya believe he might actually care. One evening, as Maya was reading a book in the living room, she heard the familiar sound of Nathaniel's footsteps approaching. He entered the room slowly, his expression more thoughtful than usual. Maya glanced up from her book, meeting his gaze for a brief moment before looking back down. "Hey," Nathaniel said softly, leaning against the doorframe. "Can we talk?" Maya didn't answer immediately. Instead, she marked her place in the book, closed it, and set it aside. "About what?" she asked, her voice steady, though a knot of uncertainty twisted in her stomach. Nathaniel pushed off the doorframe and stepped into the room, his movements hesitant but determined. "I've been thinking about everything lately, about you, about Lily, about us. I don't know what I expected when we first met, but it wasn't this. It wasn't the way you've shown up for me, for her, the way you've shown up for yourself." Maya swallowed hard, feeling her heart race. She wasn't sure where this conversation was heading, but she had a feeling it was going to make her question everything she thought she knew. "You've been through so much," Nathaniel continued, his voice low, "and I've never really understood what that's like. I've been so caught up in my own world, my own problems, that I didn't see the strength it takes to carry the weight of everything you've had to carry. But I see it now, Maya. I see you. And I see what you've done for Lily. For me. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know how to respond to that. She had spent so much time telling herself that she didn't need anyone's validation, that she didn't need anyone to see her for who she truly was. But hearing him say it, that he saw her, that he understood her, it hit her harder than she expected. I never asked for any of this, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't ask for you to notice me, or for Lily to depend on me. I was just trying to survive, trying to make it through one day at a time. And I've always told myself that I didn't need anyone. But now I don't know what to do with all of this. Nathaniel took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. You don't have to do anything with it. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm just asking you to let me be here, to let me be a part of this. I can't undo everything that's happened, but I can be better. For you. For Lily. For us. Maya blinked back tears, her heart aching with a mixture of relief and fear. It was the first time she had ever heard him speak so openly, so honestly. It was the first time she had ever seen him truly vulnerable. And as much as she wanted to hold on to the walls she had built, she knew deep down that she couldn't keep shutting him out. Not anymore. I'm scared, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Scared of getting hurt. Scared of trusting you. Scared of trusting myself. Nathaniel reached out and gently cupped her cheek, his touch warm and steady. I get it, he said softly. I do. But trust isn't something that happens overnight. It's something we build together, one step at a time. I'm willing to take that step, Maya. If you are. Maya closed her eyes, letting out a shaky breath as she felt the weight of his words settle into her chest. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know what the future held. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. She wasn't afraid to take that step with him. I'm willing to try, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But you have to understand. I'm not perfect. I'm not the woman you think I am. I have my own scars, my own fears, and I can't promise that everything will be easy. Nathaniel smiled, his eyes warm. I don't expect perfection, Maya. I just want the chance to be with you, to try, together. The room fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need words to be understood. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt like she wasn't carrying the weight of the world alone. She had Nathaniel by her side, and for all his flaws, he was trying. And that, she realized, was all she needed right now. Later that evening, after they had both spent some time in their respective corners of the house, Maya found herself walking down the hallway toward the nursery. She wasn't sure why she felt drawn to it, but there was something about the stillness of the room, the peace that seemed to fill it, that made her want to be near Lily. As she approached the door, she saw Nathaniel standing by the crib, watching Lily sleep. He looked up when he heard her footsteps, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. She's growing so fast, he said quietly, his voice full of wonder. Maya nodded, stepping closer to him. She's a miracle, she said, her voice thick with emotion. A little light in the dark. Nathaniel turned to her, his expression tender. And you're the one who gave her that light. Maya's heart swelled as she looked at the two people who had become her world. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time she wasn't afraid. With Nathaniel and Lily by her side, she knew they could face anything that came their way. Together. The unspoken bonds. The days continued to stretch into weeks, and Maya found herself settling into a routine that felt more like life than survival. There was still much to navigate, of course. Old habits didn't disappear overnight, and the shadows of her past sometimes crept in when she least expected it. But there was a growing sense of stability, a foundation she hadn't realized she longed for until it was finally within reach. Nathaniel's presence in her life had shifted in a way that surprised her. It wasn't about grand gestures anymore, the fancy dinners or the moments that felt orchestrated for an audience. It was the quiet moments, the subtle shifts in his behavior, that spoke volumes. Maya had caught him several times simply watching her with an expression that was more than admiration. It was understanding, a realization that went beyond the surface of things. He was seeing her, the real her, not as the woman who served, but as someone who mattered. But it was in the moments with Lily that Maya truly understood the depth of what had changed. Lily had become her anchor in many ways. The little girl had an innocence that Maya hadn't realized she'd lost, a simplicity that allowed Maya to breathe easier in her presence. Maya had become more than just a caretaker. She was someone Lily trusted, someone who offered her a sense of safety in a world that was still shifting and uncertain. One evening, as Maya was getting Lily ready for bed, she found herself lost in thought as she carefully adjusted the blanket around the child. The soft glow of the nightlight bathed the room in a warm, comforting light, and Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She was here, in this moment, in this room, and it felt like she belonged. "You're quiet tonight." Nathaniel's voice interrupted her thoughts, his presence entering the room just as he always did, quietly, without fanfare. His footsteps were soft, and the gentle weight of his gaze was something that had become familiar to Maya in a way that made her chest tighten. Maya looked up at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Just thinking," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "About what?" Nathaniel asked, stepping closer. His eyes lingered on Lily, who was now asleep in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling in a rhythm that filled Maya's heart with a kind of peace she hadn't known was possible. Maya took a deep breath before speaking. "How much has changed? And how much more still needs to? I never thought I'd be here, you know. With you. With her." She motioned to the crib, her voice thick with emotion. "It feels like I'm living someone else's life sometimes." Nathaniel stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers in a gesture that felt intimate in its simplicity. "Maybe it's not someone else's life, Maya. Maybe it's just the life you were meant to have. Not because of anything I did, but because of you. You've built this life one choice at a time, and I've been lucky enough to be a part of it." Maya looked at him, searching his face for any hint of insincerity, but found none. It was as though the man who had once been so distant, so consumed by his own world, had transformed into someone she could trust, someone who had become part of her own world. "I never thought I'd trust anyone again," Maya said, her voice barely audible. "Not after everything. Not after the years of being let down." Nathaniel nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving her. "I get that. I really do. But you're not alone anymore, Maya. Not in this. Not with me. And not with Lily." The weight of his words hung between them, heavy with the promise of something real. Maya had always been afraid to trust, afraid that if she let someone in too deeply, they'd find a way to disappoint her. But Nathaniel was different. He wasn't perfect, and he wasn't pretending to be. But what mattered now was that he was here, and he was trying to be the man Maya needed, trying to be the father Lily deserved. "I'm scared," Maya admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know if I can keep doing this, being the person everyone needs me to be. I'm just one person, and sometimes I feel like I'm failing." Nathaniel reached out, cupping her cheek gently with his hand. His touch was warm, and the steadiness in his gaze seemed to ground her in a way she hadn't expected. "You're not failing," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You're doing exactly what you're meant to be doing, being here, loving her, loving me. That's enough. It's more than enough." Maya closed her eyes, allowing herself to lean into his touch for a moment before pulling back, her breath shaky. "I don't know if I can let myself believe that," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to believe it all at once," Nathaniel said, his voice gentle but unwavering. "You just have to take it one step at a time. And when you're ready, we'll take the next step together." It was a simple promise, but it was one that resonated deeply with Maya. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone in her fears. Nathaniel was offering her something she hadn't thought possible. A future, one where she didn't have to carry everything by herself. She didn't have to have all the answers, and she didn't have to be perfect. And in that moment, Maya realized that it wasn't just Lily who needed her. She needed them, too. She needed Nathaniel and the quiet love he offered. She needed the space to be vulnerable, to make mistakes, and to know that she would still be accepted. "You're right," Maya said, finally meeting Nathaniel's gaze once more. "I don't have all the answers. But maybe, for the first time, I'm starting to believe that I don't have to." Nathaniel smiled, his eyes soft with understanding. "You don't, and that's more than enough." They stood there for a long moment, the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future hanging in the air. But Maya no longer felt the crushing burden of those unknowns. With Nathaniel and Lily by her side, she felt like she had the strength to face whatever came next. The door to the nursery creaked open, and Maya looked up to see Lily standing in her crib, her small hands gripping the rails. She let out a soft giggle, her eyes bright and full of wonder. "Daddy," she said, her voice soft and sweet. Nathaniel stepped toward her, a look of complete adoration on his face. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, lifting her up gently and cradling her in his arms. Maya smiled as she watched them, her heart swelling with something that felt a lot like peace. It wasn't perfect, but for the first time it didn't need to be. They were learning, all of them, how to be a family. And that, Maya realized, was enough. Her mind flickered to Nathaniel. He had become more than just the man who paid her salary. He had become someone she trusted. Someone who had quietly, without asking for anything in return, shown her a kind of respect she hadn't known in years. His presence wasn't demanding or overwhelming. It was steady and patient like the rhythm of the ocean's waves, constant and comforting. As she whisked the eggs, the familiar sound of footsteps approached. Nathaniel entered the kitchen, his shirt slightly rumpled from the night and his hair tousled in a way that made him seem more human, less like the CEO of a billion-dollar company. Maya had gotten used to seeing him this way, vulnerable, unpolished, but undeniably real. "Good morning," he said, his voice still thick with sleep. He reached for the coffee pot, his usual early morning ritual. "Morning," Maya replied, a soft smile tugging at the corner of her lips. It wasn't the smile she wore for the world, but the one she wore for him, the one that had become more natural the longer they spent together. "Smells good," he commented, leaning against the counter and taking a sip of his coffee. Maya nodded, her hands still moving as she set the table. "Just some eggs and toast. Nothing fancy." Nathaniel watched her for a moment, his gaze gentle but thoughtful. "You've always had this way of making the simple things feel important." Maya paused, looking up at him. "I don't know about that. It's just food." "No," Nathaniel said, his voice firm. "It's more than that. It's the way you give attention to everything, to the details, to the people around you. It's something I've noticed about you from the start." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't used to receiving compliments, especially not ones that felt so genuine. The walls she had built around herself had kept her safe for so long, but now she was beginning to realize that some walls weren't meant to stay up forever. "I didn't always know how to do that," she said softly, her voice a mixture of vulnerability and strength. "I used to think it was just about getting through the day, keeping my head down, but I guess I've learned that it's the little things that matter the most." Nathaniel didn't speak at first, but his expression softened, his eyes searching hers. "You're more than just the little things. You're the big things too, Maya. You've changed this house, changed me." Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, but before she could respond, the sound of small footsteps echoed down the hallway. Lily appeared in the doorway, her tousled curls a perfect match for her sleepy, wide-eyed expression. "Good morning, Ma," she exclaimed, running toward Maya with her arms outstretched. Maya's heart melted as she knelt to catch her, pulling the little girl into her arms. "Good morning, sunshine," she said, pressing a kiss to Lily's forehead. The simple act, the quiet exchange of affection, felt like a promise that no matter what else happened, she would always be there for this little girl. "Did you sleep well?" Maya asked, brushing a curl from Lily's face as the girl snuggled closer. Lily nodded, her small fingers playing with the hem of Maya's shirt. "I dreamt of butterflies. And you, Ma." Nathaniel's eyes softened at the sight of them. He had come to cherish these moments as well. The quiet, the tenderness, the connection between Maya and Lily. It wasn't just about what Maya had done for him. It was about what she had done for Lily. And that meant more than anything. Maya smiled down at Lily, brushing her hair out of her face. I'm glad you dreamt of butterflies. Let's have breakfast, okay? Lily nodded eagerly, and as Maya stood to finish preparing the meal, Nathaniel stood by, his eyes never straying far from the scene in front of him. It was these moments, the unspoken ones, that told him everything he needed to know. Maya had given them both something they hadn't known they were missing: a home. Over breakfast, the conversation turned to their plans for the day. Maya had a meeting at the Grayson Foundation later that afternoon, and Nathaniel had some work to do at the office. Despite the difference in their worlds, they had begun to find a rhythm, a balance that allowed them to support each other in ways they hadn't expected. Maya was no longer just the nanny or the help. She was part of the family. And Nathaniel, for the first time, wasn't carrying the weight of everything on his own. As the meal came to a close, Maya and Nathaniel shared a look, a quiet understanding passing between them. It was as if they both knew something had shifted, something deeper than just their roles in the house. They were building something real, and that was the foundation they needed to move forward. Later, as Maya prepared to leave for her meeting, she caught herself looking at Nathaniel, a sudden wave of uncertainty crashing over her. She hadn't realized how much she had come to rely on him, on their time together, on the peace she had found in this strange new world. "You're going to do great today," Nathaniel said, his voice steady, like he always was. "And don't forget, you belong here. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." Maya's eyes softened, her heart swelling with emotion she couldn't quite put into words. "Thanks," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything." He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I'm always here." And in that moment, Maya realized something. She had found her place not just in this house but in this life. She didn't have to hide anymore. She didn't have to keep running. For the first time in a long time, she was ready to face whatever came next. Whether it was the complexities of family, the challenges of work, or the quiet moments that made everything worth it. As Maya left for her meeting, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. She wasn't just existing anymore. She was living. And the best part? She was doing it with Nathaniel and Lily by her side. The power of truth. The meeting at the Grayson Foundation had gone exactly as Maya had expected. Professional, efficient, and as always, full of people who seemed to have their heads buried in spreadsheets more than in the real world. Maya, however, couldn't help but feel that something had shifted within her. The moment she stepped into the boardroom, she realized that this wasn't just a meeting, it was a battleground. And for the first time in her life, she was ready to stand her ground. Maya wasn't the same woman she had been when she first arrived at Grayson Industries. She had spent years being invisible, hiding in the shadows of those who thought they had the power to control her. But now, she had come to understand that her voice, her presence mattered, and she was no longer willing to sit quietly in the back seat while others made decisions about her life. Her hands gripped the edge of the conference table as the meeting began, her eyes scanning the room. There was a sense of tension in the air, as if everyone was waiting for her to make the first move. She could feel their eyes on her, judging her, questioning whether she truly belonged here. But Maya didn't flinch. Instead, she sat tall, her posture unwavering, her mind focused on the task at hand. Nathaniel had briefed her before the meeting, explaining the direction they were heading with the foundation's new initiatives. The room was full of executives and board members, some familiar faces, others new. But there was one man who caught Maya's attention immediately: Jeffrey Clean, the man who had once spoken to her like she was nothing more than a tool to be used, the man who had made it clear that her position in this company was nothing more than a temporary convenience. He had his back to her, but she could feel his presence the moment she entered the room. His body language was stiff, arrogant even, as though he had already decided that the meeting was beneath him. Maya's jaw tightened, but she didn't let her emotions take over. This was her moment. "Let's get started," Nathaniel said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that Maya hadn't noticed before. He wasn't just the CEO of Grayson Global anymore. He was her ally. And in this room, that made all the difference. As the discussion moved forward, Maya found herself contributing more than she had ever imagined. Her insights into the community-based features of the app were well received, and the team members who had once doubted her now listened with a newfound respect. She was no longer the outsider. She was part of the conversation, part of the future of this company. But it was the moment when the discussion turned to finances that everything shifted. Jeffrey stood up, his expression smug, his hands clasped behind his back. "I still don't understand why we're diverting resources to these, what do you call them, community-based initiatives," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "We're here to make money, not to play social worker." The room fell silent. Maya could feel the eyes of everyone in the room turn toward her. This was the moment she could either back down and remain silent or speak her truth and make it clear once and for all that she wasn't afraid. Without hesitation, Maya stood up. Her voice was steady, firm, but laced with the kind of authority she had spent so long searching for. "With all due respect, Jeffrey, this isn't just about money. It's about making a real difference in the lives of people who have been overlooked and forgotten. People like me," she said, her eyes locking with his. The room was quiet, but the energy had shifted. Maya could feel it in her bones. This wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was a battle for something much bigger than herself. "I didn't come here to be just a cog in the machine. I came here because I believe in what we're doing. I believe in this app, in the vision we're building, and I believe that we have a responsibility to give a voice to those who have been silenced for too long." Jeffrey scoffed, clearly unamused by her words. "And what exactly makes you qualified to speak on these matters?" he asked, his tone dismissive. Maya didn't flinch. "I don't need a fancy degree or a resume filled with accolades. What I have is experience. The kind of experience you can't fake or buy. I know what it feels like to be invisible, to be discarded, and I know what it takes to give people the opportunity to stand up for themselves when no one else will." There was a moment of stunned silence in the room. For the first time, Jeffrey seemed caught off guard, his smug expression faltering just slightly. Maya could see it in his eyes, the realization that he had underestimated her, that she was more than just the maid or the caretaker. She was a force to be reckoned with. Nathaniel's voice broke the silence. "Maya's right," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "This is about more than just money. It's about creating a legacy, one that values people and their stories." Maya could feel the weight of Nathaniel's support behind her, but she knew this was her fight. It always had been. And in that moment, she realized that she had already won, not because of anything anyone else had done, but because she had stood up for herself and for all the people who had never been given the chance to do so. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Jeffrey sat back down, his expression unreadable, but Maya could see the shift in his demeanor. He was no longer the authority in the room. Maya was, and she had earned that. Later that evening, as she walked out of the conference room, her mind still racing with the adrenaline of the day, Maya found Nathaniel waiting for her. His eyes were filled with pride, but there was something else in them too, something deeper. "You were incredible today," he said, his voice low but full of admiration. Maya shook her head, still trying to process everything that had happened. "I didn't expect it to be like this," she said softly. "I thought I was just going to be a bystander. But today I felt like I was finally being heard." "You were," Nathaniel replied, his voice steady. "And you're not going anywhere. You've made your mark here, Maya, and no one can take that away from you." Maya smiled, the weight of the day finally starting to settle. "Thanks," she said, her voice filled with gratitude, "for believing in me." Nathaniel's eyes softened, and he stepped closer to her. "I always have, Maya. I always will." And in that moment, Maya realized that the future wasn't just about what they could accomplish together. It was about the bond they had forged, the truth they had spoken, and the lives they would continue to change. The world had once told her she was nothing. But today, she had shown it that she was everything, building trust and facing shadows. The days following the meeting were a blur for Maya. She had never imagined she'd be the one to speak out in a room full of powerful people, let alone hold her ground with someone like Jeffrey. But now that it was over, and the meeting's ripple effects had already begun to spread through the company, she found herself grappling with something that was both a victory and a new challenge. Walking through the hallways of Grayson Industries, Maya couldn't help but feel the weight of all eyes on her. It wasn't the kind of gaze she had once received, the kind that made her feel small or invisible. But there was a certain curiosity in the air now. People were whispering, unsure whether to see her as an outsider still, or as someone who had proven she belonged here. And to be honest, she wasn't sure where she stood herself. The truth was, the fight wasn't over. The victory of the meeting didn't erase the complexities of the dynamics she faced. While some of the board members had expressed their support, others were skeptical. They didn't trust someone who didn't have the polished credentials they valued. Jeffrey, though out of the picture for now, still loomed in her mind. He wasn't a man who would be easily defeated, not when he had the resources to wage war silently, through influence and intimidation. Maya had to be prepared for that, not only to defend her position in the company, but to safeguard the work she was doing with the app and the foundation. There were forces at play here that she couldn't afford to ignore. The only thing that kept her grounded was the knowledge that she had earned this. The room may have been full of sharp suits and polished shoes, but she had come into this space as something entirely different. She wasn't someone who was just climbing a corporate ladder. She was a woman who had fought through hardship, who had seen the worst of the world, and who understood better than anyone the value of a second chance. It was that truth that had propelled her to stand up for herself in that meeting. It wasn't about proving her worth to them, it was about proving it to herself. Maya had always been the one to shrink, to stay in the background, to wait for someone else to decide her fate. But now she knew her fate was hers to control. Later that afternoon, after finishing some work at the foundation, Maya walked through the quiet halls of the Grayson estate. The house felt different now, not empty, but fuller somehow, more alive, more like a home. She passed through the living room, where Nathaniel was sitting with Lily, who had fallen asleep curled up in his lap. The soft hum of a lullaby drifted from the speakers, filling the space with a sense of calm that Maya had grown to treasure. Nathaniel looked up as she entered, offering a tired smile. "Hey, I was just about to make some dinner," he said, shifting slightly to make more room on the couch. "Dinner sounds good," Maya said softly, smiling as she walked over to sit beside him. She glanced down at Lily, who was sleeping peacefully in her father's arms. "You're good at this," she said, her voice gentle. Nathaniel looked down at his daughter, his expression softening. "I'm learning," he said, his voice quiet. "I didn't think I'd be this person, Maya. But with you here, it feels different. Right." Maya's heart swelled at his words. She wasn't sure what had changed between them, whether it was the shared moments with Lily, the late-night conversations, or the unspoken understanding that had begun to develop. But something had shifted, and she couldn't ignore it. She leaned back against the couch, her eyes flicking to the window, where the first stars were beginning to appear in the evening sky. "It's hard, you know," she said, her voice distant. "Sometimes I think I'm just playing pretend. Like I don't really belong here. I wasn't raised for this. I wasn't raised for any of this." Nathaniel's gaze was unwavering as he listened. He didn't interrupt, just let her speak. "Do you ever think that maybe we're all just pretending? Acting like we have it all together when, in reality, we're all just figuring it out as we go?" She continued, her words coming slowly, but with a weight that she hadn't expected. Nathaniel took a deep breath, shifting so that he was facing her more fully. "All the time," he said. "It's terrifying sometimes, Maya. But you know what I've learned? That doesn't matter. What matters is how you keep going, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. You keep showing up, and I think that's what makes us strong." Maya smiled at him, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "I don't know if I'm strong. I've been running from things for so long. I didn't know how to stop, how to stay." Nathaniel didn't look away from her. "Well, now you know. You've stopped. And you've stayed. You're here. And I think that's enough." The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was real, in a way that neither of them had ever allowed before. Maya had always been careful with her words, with her emotions, but with Nathaniel, she didn't have to be. For the first time, she felt like she could breathe, fully and without fear of being judged or rejected. But there was still so much to figure out. The shadows of their pasts hung over them, the things they had yet to confront, the things that still terrified them. Maya wasn't sure where all of this was headed, whether it was a love story, a partnership, or just a series of events that led them in unexpected directions. Before she could speak again, the sound of Lily's small voice broke through the quiet. "Mama?" the little girl murmured, her eyes still closed but her hand reaching out in search of Maya. Maya was up in an instant, her heart pounding. She carefully lifted Lily from Nathaniel's lap and cradled her close. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "I'm here." Lily snuggled into her, her small body warm against Maya's chest. "I was scared," she whispered. Maya kissed her forehead gently. "You don't have to be scared. You're safe. You're always safe with me." As Lily's breathing slowed, Maya felt Nathaniel's gaze on her. She glanced at him, her eyes meeting his. There was something unspoken there, something both terrifying and beautiful. "You're not just the nanny, Maya," Nathaniel said quietly. "You're the one who's been keeping this family together, and I don't think I can thank you enough for that." Maya didn't answer, but as she sat back down with Lily in her arms, she realized that she didn't need to say anything. The truth was already there, in the simple act of being present. And for once, Maya felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The burden of secrets and the weight of forgiveness. The morning air in New York was crisp, the city still caught in the slumber of the early hours before the rush of the day would begin. Maya stood on the balcony of her new apartment, gazing out at the skyline. The view was different now. It was no longer just a symbol of success or the concrete jungle that had once overwhelmed her. It was a reminder of how far she had come, a small victory in the battle of life, where survival was never the goal. Living had become her pursuit, and she had made it this far not by running, but by standing still, letting the world come to her in pieces. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Nathaniel. "We need to talk. Call me when you can." She sighed, her fingers lingering over the screen for a moment. What more was there to say? They had fought together, they had built something real. But there was always more beneath the surface, things unsaid, shadows that still clung to them both. No matter how much they had built, the past had a way of following them like a shadow, always lurking just behind. Maya turned back into the apartment, her mind racing as she walked over to the coffee machine. She hadn't realized how much she needed a moment to herself until now. A few months ago, she had never imagined a life like this. She had been living for survival, fighting every day to stay afloat. But now she was building a future she had never allowed herself to dream of. She poured herself a cup of coffee and stared at the steaming liquid, the warmth of it grounding her. She had always thought that success would come in loud, clear moments, big celebrations, grand gestures. But now she knew it wasn't about that. Success for her had come quietly. It was in the stillness. It was in her ability to be present, to care, to build something real even when the world told her she didn't belong. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of the doorbell ringing. She frowned, setting the coffee cup down and walking toward the door. When she opened it, she found herself face to face with a familiar figure. Carla, her loyal friend, and the woman who had believed in her from the very start, stood on the other side. She was holding a large bouquet of flowers, the vibrant colors standing out against the gray morning. "Morning," Carla said with a grin. "I thought you could use a little pick-me-up." Maya smiled, stepping aside to let her in. "You're a lifesaver." Carla entered, looking around the apartment. "This place is gorgeous," she commented, her eyes scanning the modern decor. "You really landed on your feet." Maya nodded, though the words felt heavy. "I guess it's just, everything feels so different. I've had to get used to this." She motioned to the apartment, the life she had built in such a short time. It was a far cry from the life she'd lived in the Bronx, the life she had fought so hard to escape from. She had always imagined herself in the shadows, but here, in this moment, she was the one who was seen. Not just by Nathaniel, not just by Lily, but by herself. Carla raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a smile. "Different's good, right?" Maya didn't answer right away. The truth was she wasn't sure anymore. It was good, yes. But there were always whispers in the back of her mind. Questions about the price of it all, the success, the stability, the chance to finally rest. She wasn't sure she knew how to let go of the fear, the deep-seated terror of losing everything that she had fought for. Carla, sensing the shift in Maya's mood, placed the flowers on the table and walked over to her. "You've come a long way. You've done more than anyone expected of you. And now it's time to breathe." Maya smiled faintly. "I don't know if I know how to do that." "I get it," Carla said, her voice gentle. "But you'll figure it out. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." Maya let out a breath, feeling the weight of the last few months pressing down on her. She hadn't let herself feel the exhaustion until now, until she was finally allowed to pause. But there was something else too, a fear that gnawed at her when she thought of the future, a fear of what might come after everything she had done. Before Maya could respond, her phone buzzed again. It was Nathaniel. She glanced at the screen before swiping to answer. "I'm on my way." His voice came through, low and steady, as if he already knew she was waiting for this moment. "We need to talk, Maya." Her chest tightened at the words, but she nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Okay, I'll be here." Carla shot her a questioning look. "Everything all right?" Maya exhaled, the breath shaky. "I don't know. Nathaniel wants to talk about something. I'm not sure what it is." Carla, sensing the weight in her voice, didn't ask further questions. She simply gave Maya a reassuring squeeze on the arm. "Whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone. You've got me." Maya managed a small smile. "Thanks, Carla." By the time Nathaniel arrived, the apartment was quiet again. Maya stood by the window, watching the city below, feeling her pulse quicken with each passing moment. She couldn't ignore the sense of dread creeping into her chest. The truth was, they hadn't talked about everything. They hadn't addressed the things that lingered between them, the things Nathaniel was still hiding, the things that haunted her. When the doorbell rang, Maya's heart skipped. She opened the door, finding Nathaniel standing there, his posture tense, his expression unreadable. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "You wanted to talk?" Maya asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel stepped inside, his gaze not leaving hers. "Yeah, we do." Maya felt the weight of his words as he closed the door behind him. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew that whatever came next, it would change everything. As Nathaniel stood before her, his eyes soft but filled with uncertainty, Maya realized that the moment had arrived, the moment when they would have to face the truth together, confronting the past and embracing change. The room was quiet, filled only with the faint hum of the city outside, the kind of sound that never quite goes away. Maya and Nathaniel stood across from each other, their gazes locked in a tense silence. The weight of the unspoken was palpable, a barrier between them that neither had fully addressed until now. Maya could feel the thick air around them, the same air she had once been trapped in, the air of expectations and hidden truths, all of which had come to a head today. Nathaniel was the first to speak, his voice hesitant but steady. "Maya," he began, his eyes searching hers, "I need to apologize. I know I've been distant, and I know I haven't been fair to you, especially with everything you've done for me, for Lily." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I took you for granted, and I never gave you the credit you deserve." Maya felt the truth of his words, though they didn't come easily. She had seen Nathaniel at his worst, his anger and pride masking the man he was becoming. But she also saw a different side of him now, one that was vulnerable and open in ways she had never imagined. Despite all that had happened, the man standing in front of her was trying in ways that mattered. Still, she wasn't sure whether it was enough. "I've been scared too, Nathaniel," she said softly, her voice betraying a hint of the emotion she had been hiding for so long. "Scared that I was just another person in your life who would come and go, that I wasn't really a part of what was happening here, that I wasn't really seen." Nathaniel took a step closer, his expression softening. "Maya, you've always been more than just another person to me. You've been the one who has made everything real." He paused, his hand reaching out, almost as if to touch her, but then withdrawing slightly. I'm not good at expressing this. I never have been. But I know what I feel. And I know what I need. I need you, Maya. Not just for Lily, but for me. And I'm sorry it took me this long to figure that out. Maya looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. His words hit her harder than she expected, stirring something deep within her that she had been avoiding for months. She had buried her emotions beneath layers of self-preservation and fear of being hurt again. But in this moment, everything felt raw and exposed, and for the first time in a long time, she felt herself begin to soften. "I've been afraid of what this means," she admitted, her voice quiet. "Afraid that I would become someone else's project, someone else's charity case, but I'm not any of those things, Nathaniel. I've worked too hard to be who I am now." "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And that's why I need you to know something. I'm not asking you to stay out of obligation, Maya. I'm asking because I need you here. For me, for Lily, for us." The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard, and Maya found herself at a crossroads. She had always been the one who left when things got too hard, who ran when she felt like she wasn't wanted. But this time, she wasn't sure what would happen if she ran. For the first time, she felt like staying might be the hardest, but also the right choice. "What about the company?" Maya asked, her brow furrowed. "What about all the people who don't believe in me? Who still think I'm just the help?" Nathaniel's face hardened at the mention of those who doubted Maya's place in his life. "I don't care what they think. You belong here. You've already proven that. And if they can't see that, then that's on them, not you." Maya exhaled, feeling the tightness in her chest begin to loosen. She had been carrying the weight of those judgments for so long, but hearing Nathaniel speak like this made her realize something important. She didn't need their approval. She didn't need to fit into their world to matter. "I don't know if I can completely let go of the past," she confessed, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I still feel like I'm holding on to something, like I'm still that person who's been forgotten and overlooked." Nathaniel reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "You're not that person anymore, Maya. You've already shown the world who you are. Now it's time to show yourself." Maya swallowed, trying to steady her breath. She could feel the weight of his words sinking in, slowly replacing the fear and doubt she had been holding on to for so long. She had spent years fighting to prove her worth to others, but now she realized it was time to prove it to herself. "You're right," she said quietly. "I've been hiding for so long, from you, from everyone, even from myself. I'm scared of what might happen if I let go of that fear. But I'm ready." Nathaniel smiled, the weight of their conversation beginning to lift. "You don't have to be afraid anymore, Maya. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you." For a moment they stood in the quiet of the room, their hands intertwined, the city outside bustling away. The past few months had been a whirlwind, a series of twists and turns that neither of them had expected. But in this moment, as they stood together, Maya realized that the future was wide open. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't clear, but it was theirs to shape. "I want to be a part of your life, Nathaniel," Maya said, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. "Not because you need me, but because I want to be here. For you, for Lily, for all of it." Nathaniel's eyes softened with emotion as he leaned forward, his lips brushing against her forehead. "And I want you to be, more than anything." As the evening settled around them, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. There would still be challenges, there would still be moments of doubt and fear, but she had found something real in the midst of it all, something that made it worth staying, worth fighting for. And as Nathaniel held her close, his hand resting gently on her back, Maya knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The strength in vulnerability. The days that followed felt like a quiet unfolding, a gentle pulling back of the layers that had kept Maya at a distance for so long. It was as if the world around her was holding its breath, waiting for her to decide what to do with the newfound space in her life. Nathaniel was still there, a constant presence, steady, unwavering, but with something softer in his eyes, something that hadn't been there before. It was the kind of softness that made Maya believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't walking this path alone anymore. There was a sense of safety in his presence, a sense of something being built that hadn't been there before, a foundation that was still shaky, still fragile, but real. They spent the days navigating this quiet shift, not with grand gestures or dramatic confessions, but with small moments. A cup of coffee in the morning, a shared look in the hallway, a quiet conversation while Lily played in the other room. It was all so simple, so ordinary, but in that simplicity, Maya found herself. Lily had become the quiet pulse of their little world. The child who had once cried out in the middle of the night, alone and scared, now fell asleep with a quiet sigh in Maya's arms, trusting that she would be there when she woke up. There was something in the way Lily reached for her now, a knowing that had developed over time, a bond forged not by blood, but by love. Maya had never known a love like this before. A love that didn't come with expectations or conditions. A love that was just there. But with this new understanding came a new challenge. Maya had lived most of her life in survival mode, always on edge, always waiting for the next disaster. She had built walls around herself, ones that had kept her safe, but ones that also kept people out. Now, with Nathaniel's apology, with his quiet support, Maya found herself faced with a question she hadn't been ready for. Could she allow herself to trust again? She spent the next few days reflecting on the choices she had made, the life she had lived, and the people she had led into her world. It was easier to keep things at arm's length, easier to push people away before they could hurt her. But Nathaniel had proven that not everyone was out to hurt her. That in fact, some people, some men could be trusted. And perhaps, just perhaps, the greatest act of courage was to let that trust in, even if it was terrifying. On one of the quieter afternoons, as they sat together in the living room with the sound of the city humming in the distance, Maya finally spoke the words that had been swirling in her mind for days. "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about," she said, her voice steady but laced with the vulnerability she had long kept hidden. "About trust. About letting people in." Nathaniel turned his gaze toward her, his eyes soft and understanding. "And what have you decided?" Maya took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the edge of the coffee cup in front of her. "I'm still scared," she admitted, her voice low but resolute. "I don't know how to stop being scared, but I think I'm ready to try." Nathaniel didn't say anything at first, but the way he looked at her said everything. There was no judgment, no impatience. Just a quiet acceptance, a silent promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. "I'm not asking you to let go of your fear, Maya," he said after a moment, his voice gentle. "I'm just asking you to let me be a part of it. You don't have to do this alone." For the first time in a long time, Maya didn't feel the weight of her past bearing down on her. She felt the soft, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, she could let someone in. Maybe she could allow herself to be loved without fear, without the need to push it away. The next few days were filled with small moments of growth. They spent more time together, Nathaniel and Maya, Lily included, finding ways to make their new life fit together. Maya taught Nathaniel how to braid Lily's hair, laughing when he made it too tight, and Nathaniel surprised Maya with dinner one night. His cooking still as disastrous as ever, but filled with a kind of warmth that made everything taste better. There was something healing about these moments. The casual intimacy of shared routines, the unspoken understanding that no matter what happened, they would be okay. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't flawless, but it was real. And in that, Maya found something she had never allowed herself to have before: peace. But as peaceful as the days were, the weight of the outside world still lingered. The press, the board, the whispers in the hallways of Grayson Global. Maya knew that none of it had gone away. The world hadn't stopped watching her, hadn't stopped judging her for her place in Nathaniel's life. But now, it didn't matter. For the first time in her life, Maya felt grounded enough to stand tall in the face of it. She had nothing to prove to anyone, and everything to prove to herself. One afternoon, as they sat in Nathaniel's office, discussing the latest developments for the Unity project, Maya's phone buzzed. It was a text from Carla. "I need to see you. Something's come up." Maya frowned as she looked at the message, sensing the urgency in Carla's words. "I'll be back in a few," she said to Nathaniel, standing up and grabbing her coat. "I don't know what it is, but it feels serious." Nathaniel looked at her, his expression hardening slightly. "Be careful, Maya. Whatever it is, you don't have to do it alone." She smiled at him, her heart lifting at the sincerity of his words. "I know. I'll be okay." As she left the office and stepped into the elevator, Maya felt a sense of clarity. Whatever was waiting for her outside of these walls, outside of this life they were building, she knew she would face it with strength. Because for the first time, she wasn't doing it alone. And as the elevator doors closed, the city's hum filling her ears, Maya knew that no matter what came next, she would face it with an open heart. Because she had finally learned the most important lesson of all. It was not the absence of fear that made her strong, but her willingness to move forward in spite of it. The final test and the new beginning. The soft hum of the city was barely audible as Maya entered the small cafe where she had agreed to meet Carla. The low murmur of conversations and the clinking of cups filled the space, but it was the weight of the moment that pressed on her shoulders. She had been bracing for this meeting, knowing that something had changed, something important. Carla's message had been vague but urgent, and Maya knew it wasn't just another trivial matter. There was something deeper, something that would challenge the life she had begun to build. Maya walked to the back of the cafe, where Carla was sitting by the window, her face serious, a cup of tea untouched in front of her. When Carla looked up and saw Maya approach, there was a flicker of concern in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement that things were about to shift in a way neither of them could control. "You got here fast," Carla said, her voice low and cautious, as Maya took a seat across from her. "I didn't have much to do," Maya replied, glancing around the cafe. "So what's going on? You sounded off in the text." Carla exhaled deeply, setting her tea down and looking at Maya with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. "It's Jeffrey," Carla began, her tone grim. "He's making moves, big ones. And he's not playing nice. He's been meeting with people. Some familiar faces, some new ones. And I think he's trying to come after you." Maya's heart sank, the tension in her chest rising again, that familiar knot of fear threatening to tighten. Jeffrey. Even after all this time, even after everything she had done to expose the corruption at Grayson Global, he was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for his chance. "He won't quit, will he?" Maya said quietly, her fingers curling around the edge of her cup. "It's never really over with him, is it?" Carla's face hardened. "No, it's not. And I'm telling you this because I know you'll do something about it, Maya. You always do. But this time, it's not just your reputation at stake. He's targeting the foundation, the Unity Project. He knows that's where the real power is. He knows it could change everything, and he's going to try to take it down no matter what." Maya absorbed the weight of Carla's words. She could feel the familiar surge of anger rising within her, but there was no time for it. Not now. She had worked too hard, fought too long to let someone like Jeffrey destroy everything she had built, everything they had built together. "I won't let him do that," Maya said, her voice steady, though a storm brewed in her chest. "But I can't do this alone. I need to know who he's working with, what he's planning. I need to be 2 steps ahead of him this time." Carla nodded. "That's exactly why I'm telling you. I've been digging into some of the people he's been meeting with. There are connections, people on the inside, people who've been under the radar, but they're in positions of power. If we don't stop him now, he'll tear everything down. He knows all the right strings to pull." Maya sat back, her mind racing. Every part of her wanted to take action immediately, to confront Jeffrey head-on and end this once and for all. But she also knew that rushing into it blindly wouldn't do her any good. She needed a strategy, she needed information, and she needed to keep her focus on what really mattered: the foundation, Lily, and the people who were relying on her. "I'm going to need your help, Carla," Maya said, her eyes meeting Carla's with a new resolve. "We're going to take him down, but we're doing it smart. No more rushing into things. We're going to expose him for what he is, using everything he's built against him." Carla smiled, a spark of pride in her eyes. "I wouldn't have it any other way." The following days were a blur of action. Maya, Carla, and a small team of trusted allies worked tirelessly, gathering information, tracking Jeffrey's movements, and uncovering the network of people he had surrounded himself with. They learned about the deals he was making, the whispers in the halls of Grayson Global, the plans he had set in motion to undermine the Unity Project. Every step they took uncovered more of the web he had woven, and with each discovery, Maya's resolve grew stronger. It wasn't just about taking Jeffrey down anymore. It was about protecting the people who had trusted her, the ones who had believed in her vision, the ones who had been left behind for too long. The stakes were higher than ever before. Nathaniel had been supportive every step of the way, standing by Maya's side as she navigated the complex landscape of corporate corruption. But even he couldn't shield her from the pressure that mounted with each passing day. She could see the toll it was taking on him, the weight of the decisions he had to make. But despite the chaos around them, there was an undeniable shift between them. They were no longer just two people thrown together by circumstance. They were a team, united in their mission to rebuild not only Grayson Global, but the foundation they had started together. The final confrontation came one fateful evening, a meeting set up under the guise of a routine business gathering. Maya, Nathaniel, and their team arrived at the boardroom, prepared for the battle that lay ahead. The atmosphere was tense, the room filled with the usual cast of board members and investors, all of them wearing their carefully constructed masks. But Maya saw through it all. She saw the fear in their eyes, the hesitation, the uncertainty of what was coming. And then Jeffrey entered the room, his smirk as arrogant as ever. He knew exactly what he was doing, but Maya could see the cracks in his confidence. He had underestimated her, underestimated the strength that had come from everything she had fought for. As the meeting began, Maya didn't waste any time. She laid out everything, every piece of evidence, every connection, every shady deal that Jeffrey had been involved in. The room was silent as she spoke, the weight of her words sinking in. There was no denying it now. Jeffrey was finished. In the end, it wasn't just the evidence that did him in. It was the truth of his actions, the heartlessness with which he had treated others. And when Maya finished speaking, the room erupted in shock and disbelief. The executives who had supported him were left scrambling, unsure of where to turn. But Maya knew that this was the moment they had all been waiting for, the moment when the truth could no longer be ignored. Jeffrey's fall was swift. In the weeks that followed, Grayson Global underwent a transformation. It wasn't easy, but with the power of the Unity Project behind them, they were able to start rebuilding from the ground up. Maya had finally done it. She had taken down the man who had tried to ruin everything. And in doing so, she had given the world a chance to see her for who she truly was. Maya stood at the window of her new office, looking out over the city. The lights twinkled in the distance, but there was no longer any sense of isolation. She wasn't just part of the system anymore. She had changed the system. And as she looked out, she felt the weight of the journey behind her, the strength of the woman she had become. Nathaniel stood beside her, his presence as steady as ever. "We did it," he said, his voice soft but full of conviction. Maya turned to him, a smile tugging at her lips. "No," she said, her voice full of confidence. "We didn't just do it. We built something new." And as she stood there, hand in hand with the man who had once been a stranger, Maya realized that the story wasn't over. It had just begun. In part 15, Maya faces a pivotal moment in her journey as she confronts the remaining threats to the foundation she built and the life she fought for. Carla, a trusted ally, warns Maya about Jeffrey's ongoing efforts to sabotage everything. As Maya dives deep into the corruption Jeffrey has woven through Grayson Global, she prepares for the final confrontation. With Nathaniel by her side, they uncover the full extent of Jeffrey's manipulations and plan to take him down once and for all. The team works tirelessly, gathering evidence and securing the truth. When the moment comes, Maya, with determination and clarity, reveals everything to the board and exposes Jeffrey's wrongdoings, leading to his swift downfall. Throughout the confrontation, Maya's growth becomes evident. She has transformed from a woman struggling to survive into a powerful force who can stand tall and lead with conviction. The support of Nathaniel, her trust in herself, and the unity of the people around her make her stronger than ever. In the end, Maya not only defeats Jeffrey but ensures that the foundation, the Unity Project, and the people who believed in her vision will thrive. She learns the true power of standing up for what's right, trusting those who stand with her, and building something that cannot be torn down. This is a story of resilience, trust, and the power of community. Maya's journey shows that real change comes from within, and that no matter how hard the road is, it's possible to build a life filled with purpose and connection. As we close this chapter, I'm curious, where are you watching from? I'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with you. And if you found this story meaningful, don't miss our next video, where we'll dive even deeper into themes of resilience, growth, and change. Until then, take care and remember, sometimes the most profound changes start from within. Feel free to subscribe for more stories that inspire and uplift.